And we're live. All right, welcome back to the PEO Speedwagon podcast, everybody. For our viewers and not just our listeners, you are seeing us in a brand new setting. Ryan and I are actually in the same room this time. Ryan, welcome.
Yeah, it's a quantum leap forward. you came out of there and into here, but no, it's nice to do this. It's a little different. It's a little vulnerable. You can see our whole bodies now. You have to wear not that I wasn't before. You have to wear pants.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We were worried if you were, and shoes. Yes, exactly. We have to be, somewhat professional. Hence the, the work tee that I have on.
Yeah, that's nice that you worked that in.
Yeah. Had to shout out to our embroidering team.
Yes,
it's my mom.
Rick's mom.
It's my mom.
That's great. She does great work. She really does. It's not
fantastic. But no, this is a good episode, a fun episode. One thing we wanted to kind of dive into, we were talking about earlier, was just the array of different PEOs that are out there. I mean, NAPIO and the numbers say there's over 500 PEOs now. I'm trying to learn all the different kinds that there are, and so I think just a conversation with you today about the different kinds of PEOs and what organizations they might be a fit with seems like a pretty good topic we needed to cover. So.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like, when I got into this world, approaching 18 years ago, there was a lot of PEOs, but there wasn't the volume there are today. And then when you incorporate just the varying technology and service models and everything else, as someone new trying to learn this space, and also from the vantage point where we operate, which is that we can work with theoretically all of them, even though that's not the case. Not, versus someone who just works for a PEO. All the things you've had to probably learn and internalize to figure out how to make recommendations.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of like, your first introduction to PEOs. It makes a lot of sense, and you understand. But I didn't quite understand why it wasn't so popular. And then you kind of start getting into it more, and you realize it's not easy for these organizations to have an elevator pitch. There's a lot that goes into what the services are. And then when it gets more granular, and what I'm learning is that, and then they're different from each other. A lot of them offer similar services, but the varying degrees at which they do well in different areas is really what makes, a recommendation process necessary, and someone with your expertise needed.
Yeah. And it's challenging for me. We have to pull on resources. We don't flip out quick recommendations because it's not always apparent. Our process and our tech and the tools that we leverage, along with, some deep experience, really does help us get to that right recommendation, and our customers have seen that. But it's challenging, without a doubt. So I can't even imagine, I say you, but also a business, but now you've decided to get into this industry and learn it and develop, and put a lot of your time towards it. Now for a business owner who's trying to navigate this and figure this out when he or she is trying to run a business and manage employees and work with clients, how they pull their attention away from that and try to become an expert in the world of PEO to make a singular decision, albeit an important one, is really challenging. And so, that's why I think people have responded so well to what we do, because that addresses that issue and kind of hits it right between the eyes. But at the end of the day, there is just such a wide array of PEOs out there, and the ability to decipher them is really challenging.
Yeah, I got into this business strictly for the podcasting. Actually, this is the opportunity to. This is podcasting.
This is a big day. This is your full unveil.
Yeah. Well, let's run through a couple ideas, I guess, of how we can view all the different types of PEOs that exist, what some of the strengths are, and then maybe we'll run through a few examples of what types of organizations might fit with which ones.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
So I guess help me understand then, what are some of the key things certain PEOs can be good at? Where can they excel?
Yeah. We kind of look at it on a quadrant. We try, when you're looking at these different factors or metrics and across such a large array of PEOs, as I mentioned before, you really kind of got to dial it down to a few key areas. And so one is just their service model. How do they deliver it? What services are included? What are their capabilities? And the extent of the expertise that exists in the organization to execute those for a small to medium-sized business. The second is the technology. They're, There is vast technology and HR, IS systems across across the board. However, they all use different ones, or they all use the same one. There's a couple pretty common underlying technologies out there in Prism HR and iSolve, but we've come to see how they've built technology on top of it, and thus takes that underlying tech and really kind of does some different things with it. And then how that tech actually addresses the issues the organization has, from administrative burden, from compliance, from onboarding to offboarding, benefits admin. It's all very different.
Yeah.
It's staggeringly different, as we have talked to so many of them and evaluated so many. So that's kind of one of the other, quadrants. The next is cost, right? So, I mean, just like, what do they charge? Like, what is their price for their services? Not a judgment of what they charge, but just what, in fact, like whether they should charge or not, but just like what in fact they charge, and can a particular small to medium-sized business fit that into their budget? Yes, there is always the opportunity to generate savings. There is always the opportunity to generate value that offsets against that cost. So kind of this conversation of what they charge versus what they in fact cost a small to medium-sized business is always relevant. But when we're having conversations and we know that budget is going to sit more in the range of $80 to $120 per person per month, that kind of, and that value, not for the service, but rather those dollars themselves have to be considered in operating in the best interest of that small business. That's important to distill at the beginning of an evaluation, not at the end. And then really the next is kind of culture alignment. The way in which that small to medium-sized business views their employees has to match up with the PEO's philosophy around how to service and support them. It's interesting. We have worked with PEOs that I've historically deemed rigid in their service model and their culture, which is okay. Like, that's how they do it, and that's what's been right for them. And they are, and they've continued to be rigid. But then I'll see them just inside all these things they do, like do one thing that's really, really different than everything else. And you go, okay, well, that's really important for a small to medium-sized business to know, because that's advantageous inside of a rigid model. And so how they view it, where they're flexible, where they're not, and is really important to understand, because that is often what creates a lot of friction with a small to medium-sized business owner who wants to not lose control of their employees through co-employment, but maximize the value and capabilities that legal construct can do for them. So we really try to look at all four of those aspects, and we look at a lot of others, but that's, I think, often how we drill these things down.
Yeah. And, when you consider all those different quadrants too, you have to think that this is the owner of an organization who is set out to learn what a PEO is, right? Which, from my experience, is a little daunting when you're just trying to understand PEOs in general. And then at the end of that, you then start a second journey, which is now you have to pick between 4, 5, 6 different PEOs and make the right selection and go into like a much more granular evaluation process. Whereas it really just seems like they're just trying to decide, is a PEO right for me or not? And that's all the energy they have to do. You have to consider too, these are people who are saying, we're looking for someone to help us. I mean, they might already be at a capacity where looking for a PEO and just deciding on a PEO in general is all they have the capacity to do. So looking at those different quadrants, you're saying it's service, it's technology, it's cultural fit, and cost as well. Which kind of an organization would you find might go more with on the service side?
Yeah. It's an organization that is probably on the larger end of a small business sector, right? Obviously, small business is defined as anybody up to 500 employees. But then in the world of PEO, there's kind of different definitions. And so I'd say anybody in this 35 to 75 range that has, obviously an executive team and managers and true divisions of people, of departments where people are doing different things, and there needs to be support not only at how you attract and retain these individuals, but how you manage and develop them. So through performance management and learning and development type structures, where that service can kind of spider through that organization, create continuity in how they deliver training, how they deliver performance appraisals, how they evaluate employees, whether they be deemed for a promotion or for some sort of progressive discipline. So these HR or these PEOs that have what I'd call more transformative HR and real kind of leadership and development orientation HR, those are going to be more in those upmarket organizations that are looking at being 55 employees and wanting to go to 155. And they're seeing human capital as a very key strategy of getting there.
Yeah. I think service is a tricky one too, because everyone who goes into a PEO relationship wants great service.
Right.
I mean, it's everyone is looking for that as a massive component to it. And it's the same with all of the different categories that people look for, but it's more so how much weight do they want to give to the different categories that they can get out of a PEO. And I think then, another one that's kind of similar to that is cost. And so talk to me a little bit about organizations that look for certain cost structures or even lower price cost structures with a PEO.
Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious cost structure that everybody wants, which is better benefits at a lower price. Right. And it's almost across the board that everybody wants that. So that's pretty simple. It's more the cost and return on what they're going to get for that investment that is often the most important one. So, we look at some companies, there's some PEOs out there that have really easy pricing models. JustWorks is one of them. It's on their website. You can get their price. And in this kind of, SaaS world that we've been living in for the last 10 years, and now people are working in more remote workforces, like that seems to be attractive to people. It's easy to understand, and I know what it's going to cost. And that's been helpful for some of our clients that like that type of approach. But I think what's really important is understanding like what they're looking to, like what infrastructure and technology and support and service means to them, and then aligning that to the organization's budget. Because, on the smaller spectrum, 10, 12 person, organizations, they may be only able to afford really a net investment of $30, $40 per person per month.
Right.
And then you have to incorporate what the savings are going to be in these different vehicles like insurances and even 401k, if that's something you can pull into it. And so you got to know what that jumping off point is, because if you start with a fee that's more in the $150 range, you're betting on significant offset to get back to that $40 or $50 per person per month. And so knowing where it's going to start and where it needs to end is really important to aligning to a cost structure for a PEO recommendation.
Yeah. And often you'll see these different services or these different categories of things that are offered by the PEO combined. I mean, you're going to, of course, have a cost structure that's more advantageous when the PEO, in some cases, is using maybe their own technology. And so that kind of is the next one, which is the technology that they're using. You mentioned a lot of PEOs are on the Prism platform. Some of our partners are even running their own platforms and a little more agile with their development and catering to clients. What do you see as an organization that goes for a technology heavy organization?
Yeah, it's an organization that is highly streamlined in the way they not only run their business from a payroll and HR perspective, but like also how they establish like their bill rates and proposals. So organizations that need like real deep daily analysis of hours worked and the cost of, or what we often refer to as payroll burden or fringe, to be able to price their own services correctly. So that technology that kind of flows into finance systems and even sometimes IT to be able to measure, track, and follow these employees for job costing and other things is like really, really important. So if you've got a company that's got, hey, we onboard our employees, we get them into payroll, we get them into benefits, we don't, we maybe track PTO hours, like you don't have to have the most robust technology in order to serve that. Right. They can take advantage of a lot of the tools within it over time, but at least at the origination of the relationship, and maybe until the business changes some way, you don't need to get them into a heavy tech platform. But, we work with an IT consulting group that does exactly what I described. They do job costing. They do wage and fringe analysis so they can make sure that they're billing their customers appropriately. And those customers are paying current on payroll. So like that is super important. So the ability for that information to track, report accurately, and have that dive into not only the HR system, but their finance systems is super critical. And so making sure that you establish those priorities about what payroll actually does for the business, not only from paying their employees, but serving other functions, is really important to establish.
Yeah. I think I got a few new keywords that I need to study out of that one. What was it? Payroll fringe?
Payroll fringe.
No, payroll burden.
Or burden.
Burden.
Both.
It's a burden and a fringe.
Fringe is, a little more important to government contracting, but it's across the board. And then payroll burden is another popular one.
It's been added to the vocabulary.
I mean, I'm curious. You, Rick, have certainly been instrumental in our technology and what we've done. Like, what have you observed about maybe the technology, or just what are the things that you've observed in looking at what companies need from the PEOs that we've talked to?
Yeah, I think what's been most interesting to me is I'm kind of an AI nerd. Like I'm loving all the stuff coming out with ChatGPT and OpenAI and whatnot. And what's really cool is from my perspective, I get to see all these different demos that are run by our partners. Whereas if I was at just a single PEO or working as a sales rep there, I would just get to see the same demo over and over or do the same demo. And so I get this crash course of seeing all the technology they're using and listen to some of the public ones earnings calls, and they talk about the AI they're implementing in their systems. And so just to hear how they're getting more efficient at serving their customers while at the same time doing it better and getting faster answers, I think that's what's really cool to me. Is I'm coming in at a time when the industry is going through a massive technological revolution, and it seems like they're all doing it on this. We don't have any like laggards that we're partners with or anything where they're seeing it happen from the outside. Like they are all upgrading and scaling their use of AI and technology right now. So that's really cool to me.
Yeah. The ticket to entry now into a lot of these conversations with the small business is you've got to have this tech and you've got to be at the bleeding edge of it.
There's your bingo card. There's bleeding edge. You can cross that off.
Yeah, that's right. We'll save another one for next episode. But it's without a doubt. And people are moving quickly. And I think there's going to be cool things to come out of it. People analytics and predictive behaviors around, future employee attrition or burnout is starting to come out of some of this. And that's really cool because when employers can start to make decisions around forward-looking data that's coming out of their own environment, that's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, it's not typically an industry where you move fast and break things, right? I think like Zuckerberg said. Well, when we're talking about the different categories, I think really the big one too is the cultural fit. That's a big one for us. Is what do we look at to align an organization to a PEO to make sure there's values that align on both sides?
It hits on a couple different notes. Obviously the flexibility and rigidity of that PEO around their service model and the way in which they're willing to work with a small to medium-sized business is number one. There's times at which you can see the PEOs be quite rigid and not really put themselves in the shoes of that business owner who's been trying to do it this way out of best intentions, built some perhaps archaic systems now, or things that perhaps seem archaic to the PEO, but it is largely work with them. And so so I like, what I often see happen is PEO in a vacuum, right? It's theoretical, not application. So it's fun to work with some PEOs that really kind of understand that small to medium-sized business owner and say like, hey, I see what you've done here, what you're trying to accomplish. Let me help you recreate this in a way that one keeps you compliant and out of future peril from whether it's regulations or penalties, but also accomplish what you're trying to do. And that's something we look for.
Yeah.
Some business owners and, the people that may be listening to this, like certainly know, like there's some people that want to be told like exactly how to do it and how to follow the law. And that's really important too. So like matching, there are PEOs that will help you do just that.
Yeah.
But some that will work with them is another big cultural fit. And then, I'd say, the other side of it is, the co-employment relationship, right? They're leading with that conversation is so important to building trust and understanding and helping people recognize what that co-employment model will do for that small to medium-sized business. I see a hesitancy to talk about co-employment or kind of downplay its role. I know that sometimes that's done to make a sale easier, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the dialogue of what you're trying to do here, which is help that small to medium-sized business and let them tap into that really powerful structure.
Yeah.
And the way they're going to be able to do that is if they understand it.
Yeah. And listen, there's not going to be a second rebranding of co-employment. They called it employee leasing at first, and then it was rebranded co-employment. There's not another one coming. That is what it is. And
it was fundamentally established in like 1985. So I mean, it's here to stay. So shying away from it doesn't build trust, and so I would we certainly see people who lead with it as, hey, this is what you want. And I think that's important to do.
Yeah. The lift and shift of liability is really the key thing that sticks out to me with the co-employment model, where I'm like, why would you not want that co-employment model? Because you get to shift that liability and then essentially share it with the PEO. Well, we touched on like the different categories of what PEOs can be strong in. But really, I think the key is that they all play on each other, and they all have multiple strengths and sometimes multiple weaknesses in their areas. And so the real juggle is trying to perfectly pair the ones that have a few strengths with the right organizations. And so I guess from a more maybe like holistic view, what's the approach to recommending the right PEO when there are so many on this spectrum?
Yeah. It starts with one, which it's the part of the job I actually enjoy the most in the world of PEOMG is since we have a lot of arrows in our quiver, and that's a callback to a great PEO leader. We can sit down and really just learn about that small to medium-sized business, what their journey's been, how they got there, why did they hire these type of people, what were they trying to accomplish, and let them establish not only what their very specific needs are in the environment of HR, but which ones are most important. Like, what are the things you need to tackle first? I can tell you that's not always something a PEO rep has the opportunity to do, and we get to do that now. And so if you let a customer really kind of clue you into what's important to them and let them establish how and when they want to address them, then the recommendation comes a lot easier because they kind of start to kind of X out PEOs unknowingly. Not because that PEO is bad, it just doesn't match. And so then you get down to a couple, say 3 PEOs that could be the fit. And then that's where we take it a much deeper dive. We look into our data. We look into, really other important cultural match is the person who is going to be the consultant at that PEO.
Yeah, proximity to the organization.
Proximity, absolutely. Like, do they care about localized service? Do they like help desk HR type support?
Yeah.
But also that sales consultant or that sales leader that's going to guide them through this PEOMG process on behalf of the PEO is a really important cultural fit that we look at. So, if you got type A personality going up against another type A and neither is going to flinch, like that's going to be really kind of hard. So you got to have somebody who kind of matches and mirrors in a way that's like that fits in order for that process to be as exceptional as it can be for the customer. And that's what we care about. So, really looking at that personality styles, obviously all the 4 quadrants we talked about, and then, needs and priorities of that business owner really above everything else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Well, I think this was a fantastic episode. We got to touch on quite a few things, and
you just gave us a 5-star. You just self-rated us.
Yes. You know what? You may notice, folks, we don't have ads. So if you just want to go give us 5-star review, we will never run an ad for you. So, but everybody, thanks for listening.
Now you sound like a PEO sales rep because you came out of a call you just ran. You go, you know what? That was a really good call on your own. Like you self-assessed. That was you've come far.
Wow.
Real quickly.
Okay. That's the capstone.
Yeah. It's just tough. You come back to your office and you go, yeah, I had a great call.
I killed it. Yeah. I did great. Ryan did great. It was a good podcast. Thanks for listening. Everybody knows you can check us out on Instagram. You can see us on YouTube, on LinkedIn. We'll be posting a few of these clips on there, as well as wherever you get your podcast, Apple and Spotify. But Ryan, great job.
5 stars.
5 stars.
Great work.
Review us. Thanks.
Deal.